Colonialism did not end when the flags were lowered. It did not end when the anthems were sung. And it did not end when independence was declared. It simply changed its language, it changed its institutions, and it changed its methods. This is the story of how economic control replaced political rule, of how debt replaced domination, and how structural adjustment became the modern echo of colonialism. Under colonial rule, African, Asian, and Latin American economies were never built to develop themselves. They were built to serve empires. Railways led from mines to ports, not from villages to markets. Farms produced cocoa, cotton, tea, and coffee for Europe, not food security for locals. Factories were discouraged because colonies were meant to buy finished goods, not make them. Education was limited. Industrial skills were suppressed. Decision-making power rested far away in colonial capitals. By the time independence arrived, these nations inherited economies that were fragile, dependent, and deeply unequal. Independence brought hope, a belief that nations could finally plan their own futures. New governments invested in schools, hospitals, roads, and public industries. They protected young local businesses. They believed the state had a role in development. For the first time, development was imagined not as extraction, but as empowerment. But this dream would soon collide with global economic forces beyond their control. In the 1970s, global crises struck. Oil prices surged, export prices collapsed, interest rates rose. Young nations, still dependent on a few exports, began to borrow heavily just to survive. And when they could no longer repay those loans, one institution stood at the center of the rescue and the control: the International Monetary Fund. The IMF offered loans, but these loans came with conditions. These conditions were called structural adjustment programs. Governments were told to cut spending, to remove subsidies on food and fuel, to privatize public companies, to open markets to foreign competition, and to devalue their currencies. The logic was simple: shrink the state, trust the market, export more. But this logic ignored history, and it ignored power. When trade barriers were removed, local industries collapsed. They could not compete with cheap, subsidized imports from wealthy nations. Factories closed. Jobs vanished. Industrial dreams died. Countries were pushed back into exporting raw materials: cocoa, copper, coffee, oil, the same commodities they had exported under colonial rule. The pattern never changed. Only the overseer did. Austerity had a human face. Hospitals ran out of medicine. Schools became overcrowded and understaffed. University fees rose beyond reach. Public workers lost jobs. Farmers lost protections. The poor paid the price for policies they never chose. Economic stability was achieved on paper, but suffering spread on the ground. While states weakened, foreign corporations expanded. Privatized industries were often sold cheaply to external investors. Profits flowed outward. Control moved offshore. Once again, value was extracted, while development remained delayed. Structural adjustment was not inevitable, and it is not the future. Nations that invested in industrial policy, education, and regional cooperation have shown another path is possible. Real development requires policy space, strong institutions, and economies designed for people, not creditors. Colonialism did not end, but it can be undone. Understanding history is not about blame, it is about freedom, because a future cannot be built on an economy that was never meant to stand.